Soaring home prices are fueling our shortage of teachers.
And it doesn't make sense for teachers to continue to teach when they can't afford to live here.
Our shortage of healthcare workers.
The ones that are going to suffer are the people that I serve, and that's very heartbreaking to me.
And a shortage of builders we need to build new homes.
But nothing's changing. It's only getting worse.
And driving people much farther from work, causing more gridlock traffic. Our transportation, education, and healthcare challenges all tie into the affordable housing crisis.
They're making it impossible for anybody to get a step up.
Which brings us to the challenge with politicians we elect to fix it.
Most of your legislators are an inch deep and a mile wide when it comes to public policy.
And some of their results you may not believe.
In other words, we're subsidizing the developers to build units
that they would have already built anyways.
We investigate hundreds of millions in tax dollars going to what state lawmakers call affordable housing and what they really mean when they say that.
So developers get subsidized to then turn around and charge more than the going rate?
Yeah. When you state it that directly, yes, it's that embarrassing, yeah.
For the next half hour, we'll dig into the problem and potential solutions to Florida's affordable home crisis. Well, I'm Craig Patrick, and we'll start with working class families caught in a bind and some making striking trade-offs just to find a decent place to live.
I'm a very honest and reliable person, but it just doesn't seem that the economy has it in it to make hardworking people successful right now.
Brad Butler works long hours as a builder. He and his work partner spent 3 weeks and $6,000 of their own money fixing up this home in Dade City. Guess how much they got paid?
We didn't get paid for the work. We just agreed to that deal to be able to rent the house.
Instead of getting paid for remodeling the house, the owner is letting them rent it at a discounted rate of $1,400 a month for 1 year. After that, the rent will go up, and they'll look for something else they can afford.
Prices have skyrocketed 3 times, I think, in just this area.
People who recently moved to the Tampa Bay area may not believe what houses used to cost. In St. Petersburg, this 3-bedroom waterfront house in perfect condition sold for $133,000. That was in 1998, near the start of the tech boom, which also helped ignite the home crisis. 2 years later, the dot-com bubble burst, and investors moved what was left of their fortunes into real estate, snatching up houses everywhere, but especially in Central Florida. Real estate in our area had flown under the radar until the age of the internet revealed relatively cheap homes on or near the water for the whole world to see.
Where 750 people are moving to Florida every single day. And there just isn't enough housing being built to support that, and that's kind of created this supply and demand challenge.
At the same time, banks lowered their standards, approving high-risk adjustable mortgages to high-risk buyers with lower credit scores, while investors flipped one home after another.
People felt better about the economy. They felt better about their own positions in life, right?
Along the way, a lot of starter homes got demolished and replaced by larger, far more expensive houses, further reducing the supply of homes that working-class families can afford. Then by 2008, those high-risk buyers stopped paying the soaring cost of the high-risk mortgages. Banks failed, the economy tanked, and real estate dipped, but in our area, houses still cost much more than they did 10 years before. For example, that same house that sold for $133,000 in '98 sold for $275,000 in 2009 at the end of the downturn. And the Great Recession and glut of foreclosures crushed home builders, reducing the supply of new homes as the economy recovered.
We did have a shortage of building for a while, especially in Florida after the market crash. You know, we were ground zero for the market crash, and it took a long time for builders to get back online. A lot of builders went bust as well when that happened.
Larger, more expensive homes for larger profits, increasing the shortage of starter homes. And then as millennials moved out on their own, they preferred urban living. That drove a movement from the suburbs to the spiraling costs in cities like Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater, and Sarasota. Around this point, the government offered new tax credits for home buyers and interest rates dropped. Warren Buffett advised his fellow mega investors to snatch up homes. saying he'd buy a couple of $100,000 himself if he could.
I would load up on them, and I would take mortgages out at very, very low rates.
Oh, they followed his lead, gobbling up houses, condos, and apartments across the nation, and again, Florida in particular. Large investors and corporations replace small landlords and homeowners, and they charge soaring rents, especially in the urban areas that millennials preferred. And then in 2017, new tax cuts on investment profits fueled the frenzy. And then in 2020, the pandemic hit. Florida stood out for lifting lockdowns and restrictions before other states, and that drove a flood of relatively wealthy newcomers eager to buy.
Absolutely. Post-pandemic and during the pandemic, we saw this shift from high-tax states to states like Florida, where people can, work here and get the benefits of living here. And that has only accelerated that challenge.
Mix in another wave of hurricanes, another insurance crisis, and a new trend of millennials migrating south, with Tampa being the top relocation spot in the nation. It all combined to burn people who cannot find an affordable place to live unless they really scrimp and live a long way from work. And while we don't yet know the full impact of Hurricanes Debbie, Helene, and Milton, studies show hurricanes tend to drive Florida home prices up in the short term.
You're struggling, I'm struggling, everybody's struggling.
State lawmakers anticipated a surge in home prices more than 30 years ago and created dedicated funds to address it. But as time passed, they took and spent much of the money on other things, and fewer affordable homes got built, and fewer people got help.
Sharika Reeves lived with and cared for her grandmother, and when her grandmother passed, she had nowhere to go.
I was sleeping on my cousin's couch. I was sleeping on the floor.
And then a man who offered to help her attacked her.
He raped me.
That triggered a mental breakdown, and then a recovery in a group home, and then what she calls a miracle. A decent home in St. Petersburg that she can finally afford.
I pay around $200 a month.
Jaquetta Williams has a similar deal in a complex called Whispering Pines.
I just can't wait for Thanksgiving now that I have a kitchen to cook in.
She lost her mom, lost her job during the pandemic, and almost lost hope.
We started living in motels.
Those motels cost more than $2,200 a month.
$560 a week to pay for one room with a bathroom.
And after paying that, she could not save up the thousands of dollars needed to rent an apartment.
I didn't have the deposit. I had no way of saving enough to get a deposit. And then to get an apartment now, they want first, last, and security.
So she also calls her two-bedroom apartment a miracle.
Right now I pay $458 a month.
Rent will go up as she brings in more money, but only up to a third of her income. And the same goes for Sharika. These are examples of Florida's long-running approach to affordable housing. When people buy real estate in Florida, they pay a dock stamp tax that by law was set aside for the Sadowski Trust Funds, which fund programs like the SHIP program. And that helps fund land purchases for the construction of apartments like Whispering Pines that cap rent based on need.
Without SHIP, Whispering Pines, for example, we would not have been able to secure the land on this property.
SHIP funds also provide down payment assistance so struggling families can buy homes. And the funds also help senior citizens and others repair their homes. And while it directly addresses the housing crisis, it can also pay off in other ways.
Without them, I don't know where we would be.
For example, Jaquetta plans to become a healthcare worker, and her son is doing much better in school.
She's eager to come home and do homework now.
Meanwhile, Sharika is now in college. She plans to help the teacher shortage by becoming a teacher.
I would not have this place where I can thrive and just have hope and be able to move on with my life.
But the SHIP program has a big problem that has plagued it for years.
We had lots of controversy over the money being swept out to other places.
State lawmakers have raided the SHIP fund, siphoning much of the money to pay for their own pet projects. Since 2007, our own state lawmakers raided more than $2 billion from the SHIP chest to pay for who knows what.
And helped to create, in my opinion, the housing affordability crisis that we have today.
As home prices accelerated during the pandemic, those lawmakers took growing heat for it, and they agreed to stop raiding the funds, but with a bit of a catch.
But they have put a cap on how much money from the trust fund can be used for affordable housing.
So they said they would stop raiding the fund, but then they siphoned off the source of the funds in the first place.
Well, that's correct.
They redirected much of the dock stamp revenue before it even gets into the affordable housing funds, and sold it by saying that means they can no longer be accused of raiding it.
We are putting in state statute that fund can no longer be raided.
They diverted a lot of the money into water projects, claiming that should help with soaring home prices.
To solve this existential water problem that we have, that will make housing affordable.
But even if the state had not raided and then diverted billions in SHIP money, we'd still have a shortage of starter homes. And we'd still have a crisis of working class people who cannot get help. Teachers, firefighters, nurses, and many others are getting priced out of Florida, and yet they earn too much to qualify for SHIP benefits or other public assistance.
I think a lot of the programs you're describing, vouchers and whatnot, are for really low income people. And now with the explosion in cost, we don't have programs that are aimed at people who are professionals, because they should be making enough money and they should have enough money to be able to afford housing. But housing costs have gotten so expensive that they're falling through a gap right now.
And that compelled the governor and legislature to pass a new law called the Live Local Act. It gives developers tax breaks to build more apartments and caps some of the rent. But those new rent caps are still too expensive for teachers and other professionals. So coming up, we'll show you what politicians mean when they say they're creating affordable housing, and why a lot of working people say it costs too much.
Moving out of Jacksonville, I was able to sell my home and make a pretty decent profit off of my house.
People who can't afford to buy a home in the Tampa Bay area may wish they were in Jennifer Peters' position.
I made about $90,000 from the sale of my home in Jacksonville. I had a paid off vehicle. My debt to income ratio was extremely low with no credit card debt.
Plus a full-time professional job, master's degree, and excellent credit score.
My credit score was at 750.
You'd expect Jennifer to have no problem getting approved to buy a new home. That may be what you'd expect.
When you met with a mortgage broker and started filling out the application, where did it lead?
I was just denied, and they said, sorry, we can't find a bank that will approve your loan.
Because Jennifer's a Florida teacher.
In Florida, the cost of living just keeps rising, and the teacher salaries are the worst in the nation.
According to the NEA, it's the second worst behind West Virginia. But when USA Facts adjusted for cost of living in 2022, that did rank Florida teacher pay last.
So it's just very disheartening that I can't seem to make a survivable income in Florida.
Jennifer also tried renting an apartment. As a single mom with 2 teenagers, she looked for a place near an A-rated school and also got denied.
And every time I was being shut down because they expect you to make 3 times the rent for your salary, your monthly salary.
Rejected over and over again.
I asked to even pay a year in advance for some rentals just because I had the savings to do so, and I was told no.
She eventually got a relative to co-sign on a mortgage, and that's how she finally found a home she can afford at $2,100 a month. And by afford, we mean scrape by with tutoring and administrative side jobs on top of teaching.
So I'm probably putting in 60 to 70 hours a week.
This is the crisis state lawmakers are trying to solve with a new approach called the Live Local Act passed in 2023.
And this is the largest ever support for housing in state history.
And this is our investigation of why it may not quite work as state lawmakers intend.
So developers get subsidized to then turn around and charge more than the going rate?
Yeah, when you state it that directly, yes, it's that embarrassing, yeah.
To explain, let's dig into what the Live Local Act does. First, it commits $252 million to the SHIP program, which is geared toward helping people who cannot work or earn low incomes by government definition. And that can help a lot of people, especially since the legislature took more than $2 billion out of that same fund in prior years. But it's still a fraction of what lawmakers took from the fund, and it does not help Jennifer and other working professionals who make too much to qualify for this type of help, and too little to find a home on their own.
And it doesn't make sense for teachers to continue to teach when they can't afford to live here.
A second part of the Live Local Act spends $100 million on down payment assistance. First-time home buyers who make no more than 150% of their area median income can get up to $35,000 toward a down payment. But remember, Jennifer's not a first-time home buyer, and even if she was, this again would not help. Again, she had up to $90,000 for a down payment and still couldn't buy.
My income level was too low.
So, in practice, people with comparatively lower salaries may qualify for this help, but not be able to make use of the help, while people with six-figure salaries could. While area median income, or AMI, varies by county, in some communities, 150% of AMI means people who make more than $156,000 a year could get the subsidies, and taxpayers like Jennifer could wind up paying for it.
So a working class, a single mother in Riverview is going to Walmart to buy something for her kids, and she is paying a sales tax to potentially subsidize someone who might be making 3-4 times the amount of money.
A third and key part of the Live Local Act intends to expand the supply of affordable housing. It offers subsidies and property tax breaks to developers if their buildings set aside a certain number of units for affordable housing. And that brings us to one big and obvious question. Under this law, what do they mean by affordable housing? Specifically, how high can the rent go and still be considered affordable?
It is housing for people who make up to 120% of the area median income, which is a pretty significant amount of money now.
In short, the federal government does an annual survey on how much people make. The state then takes that median income, or AMI, for each county and adds 20%. And for much of Tampa Bay, 120% of AMI again takes us into six figures. And up to a third of that is considered affordable rent. We'll skip the rest of the math for the sake of time. And because the urban planner who helped me figure it out called it a brain buster, here's the bottom line. In Pinellas and Hillsborough counties and much of Florida, it comes out to a limit of more than $2,100 for a one-bedroom apartment and $2,500 for a two-bedroom apartment. Developers could charge less, but Pinellas County's principal planner, Jared Austin, says that's not usually how it goes.
A developer's going to go for the maximum that they can charge. That's just the way the market works.
And $2,500 for a two-bedroom apartment is more than all of these homes we found listed in Tampa, including this two-bedroom house on Davis Island. It's more than all of these homes listed in St. Pete, and it's more than this two-bedroom home in St. Pete Beach, steps away from the beach. All prices before the hurricanes hit.
That's correct. So 120% is basically market rate.
In other words, we're subsidizing the developers to build units
that they would have already built anyways.
And that they would have charged the same, if not more, for it in the end.
That's correct.
The law also overrides local zoning rules, which some city officials say could squeeze out industry and cost jobs. Coming up, we'll explain why and what more state and local governments could change.
Becky Robinson doesn't have much time between washing clothes and cleaning up around the house after working some 50 hours a week as a home health aide.
It's hard to think that I'm in my late 50s and I don't have anything. Hey, you pretty kitty.
She lives on a diet of ultra-processed food.
I prefer to eat healthy, but everybody knows that healthy costs more.
And skips meals to save money.
I normally eat about once a day.
And one meal a day is cutting it close until the next paycheck.
I squeak by with $2.30 left in my bank account.
She makes $15 an hour caring for others before taxes.
And that's with 15 years experience in the field.
With no health insurance.
I can't even think about insurance right now because that would take the place of food.
And by the way, this isn't her house. After caring for fragile seniors by day, she house sits at night, doing laundry and cleaning cat boxes for a few extra bucks to get by.
And that's with us splitting the rent 4 ways because that's the only way we can live.
And she worries that lease of $2,500 a month or $625 split 4 ways won't last because the landlord may not extend the lease.
And if they don't, I don't know where we'll wind up, because there's literally nowhere for us to go.
Because it costs too much just to move somewhere else.
One of the most affordable places I found wanted like $4,800 just to move in. And I have no idea outside of the lottery where I would come up with $4,800 just to be able to put my shoes inside the door.
Like many who want to stay in the Tampa Bay area, she would make too little to move and too much to qualify for public assistance. They're what state lawmakers call the missing middle.
The housing has gone through the roof. You can only work so many hours in a day.
That inspired the Live Local Act of 2023. It offers subsidies and property tax breaks to developers who cap rent on some of their apartment units. But the state set the rent cap based on 120% of an area's median income, and by area they mean county. So in Pinellas County, higher incomes along the beaches, Northeast St. Pete, and elsewhere drive up that median, and the same goes for South Tampa and Hillsborough County and so on. It creates a situation in which the state gives developers subsidies and tax breaks for affordable housing at 120% of AMI, which means they charge up to $2,500 a month for a 2-bedroom unit.
But there's no way I could do it.
It's too much for Becky, and in that price range, urban planners say it's not filling a shortage of homes.
There's actually a surplus in the Tampa Bay region of 120% AMI housing.
Meanwhile, the state law also preempts or removes local government control over zoning. So developers who want to participate in this can build in industrial zones against a city's wishes, potentially squeezing out jobs.
It gets a lot of people very frustrated when they say that there's no local control of how their city's actually being developed.
The state made some revisions. For example, it now allows some local governments to opt out of some of the property tax breaks. And it also banned qualifying developers from building within 10,000 feet of an airport. And while the goal is to bring down housing costs in the high-priced urban cores, that new airport restriction excludes quite a bit of the high-priced urban cores.
10,000 feet is a long way. That's almost 2 miles.
Jake Krimmer's an attorney who represents developers.
With Albert Woodard Airport, you've taken out most of downtown St. Pete.
That's right.
Peter O'Knight excludes a chunk of Tampa, and there are many other small executive airports near urban cores across the state.
Absolutely. I have probably a dozen projects that were in the pipeline, and then after that legislation came along, the projects just died because they don't qualify anymore.
A company called Landtech analyzed the maps of Tampa and the other top 4 markets in Florida to see exactly how much land that amendment excludes. And it cut out about 1/4 of the areas.
There was a reduction of about 22% of the viable sites that first came forward.
Grimmer said the Live Local Act can still deliver results and more if it's revised.
It's a great start. It is probably the most aggressive legislation in the country right now, but we can always improve it, and we should.
Former State Senator Jeff Brandes hopes state lawmakers will make changes and commission some independent research before they do.
Nobody would want to go to their doctor and let them say, let's try it and see what happens, if they had no research to back it up.
We do have some studies and some interesting ideas. And coming up, we'll break down the possible solutions with the pros and the cons. State leaders are trying to make homes more affordable by subsidizing apartment builders that cap some of their rent. But in our area, capping rent at around $2,500 for 2 bedrooms is still too much for a lot of working people. Well, the state could address that by lowering the rent caps.
Workforce housing is really a misnomer. It's focused on an income level that is not struggling. It's more money than I personally make.
Progressives support local rent control. The state banned it on the claim that it would discourage construction and landlords would be less likely to maintain their properties. St. Pete City Councilman Richie Floyd wants his city and local governments to directly fund the construction of affordable homes and own and run them.
And we can build housing for people's needs and not for investor profits.
But cities in Florida are not doing that due to the cost to taxpayers and the financial risk if local governments neglect and mismanage their properties.
Well, housing is unaffordable because of government.
Conservatives like Mike Beltran trust the private market over public funding and subsidies.
And the idea that government's going to solve a problem that it created, I just reject that notion.
Former State Senator Jeff Brandes says cities need to be more flexible in zoning.
Over time, more and more communities have focused on single-family homes on quarter-acre lots, and that's kind of become the traditional norm.
He suggests deadlines to reduce permitting time, easing parking space requirements for new homes, allowing smaller lot sizes, and allowing more single-family homes to convert into multifamily homes.
Listen, Tampa Bay is full of homes that were built in the 1950s and 60s that are ripe for redevelopment. And unfortunately, because of our current zoning laws, I can change that single-family home out with another single-family home, but that doesn't add any additional capacity to the marketplace.
Allowing more so-called tiny homes could also increase supply.
People in the need of affordable housing, 70% of those people are 1 to 2 person households. These houses work for that size family.
The National Association of Home Builders says we could reduce new home prices by reducing building costs. It proposes expanding timber harvesting in the United States, reducing tariffs on building supplies, and expanding immigrant work visas for construction workers.
Well, those are just some examples of proposals from across the aisle. We'll continue to track the policies and the progress on Fox 13 News and the Fox Local app. Thank you for watching.